Epstein, I have what your office supplied to us as your biography or resume, and it says Barbara Epstein worked in publishing and at the Partisan Review before becoming editor of the New York Review of Books in 1963. After graduating from Radcliffe College, she began her publishing career at Doubleday and Company, where she became junior editor. She grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. That is the shortest resume I think I've ever seen.
I'm so glad.
And I think
That's deliberate, really.
And I think you had to actually make this up for us here. You're not very public, are you?
Not at all. And
Why is
I hope you. Why? I think that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I just always have been. So.
And how did you find your way to the New York Review of Books in the first place?
Well, I'm one of the founders, and you know, it's the well-known story of sitting, you know, some people sitting around a room and talking about the sort of dearth of good book reviewing, and there was just a sort of, there were either at the time, which was in 1960, I guess it was the first issue, the big starter issue was in February 1963. So this was in 62, and we were sitting around, my then husband, Jason Epstein, myself, Elizabeth Hardwick, and Robert Lowell. And we were discussing this, and then the idea came up largely from Jason Epstein, who's a tremendously creative person, that the idea was, why not start one? Now, the impetus was, of course, the New York Times strike, which started in the fall of '62. And among other things, it meant, I mean, since the New York Times was the sort of monolithic cultural medium in New York City, the idea that if the New York Times does not come out, then nothing existed. In other words, if a play came on Broadway, it didn't exist because it didn't get a review in the New York Times. Of course, this is still to some extent true, but of course it goes on and on. And even then, we were somewhat critical of the cultural coverage that they were accustomed to, that we thought we would just do it. And it was a sort of spirit is, hey kids, let's put on a show, you know, with, I think, really in the back of our minds that it wasn't maybe a one-night stand, so to speak, but that we really did mean to try to keep it going, that we were trying to do something that didn't exist at the time, which is kind of reviews in depth, not having, the way the Times did, complete coverage. We don't have to, which of course gives us a lot of freedom. It also allows us to publish articles, you know, that are quite long and in depth. I mean, we were very criticized. People were so shocked by the length of some of our pieces, which actually, they're much longer than they were then. But that they thought, well, this is, you know, they're too long, which of course, you know, we didn't think they were.
Yeah, I'm looking at the August.
The last issue that we did.
Yeah, the middle of August, and
yeah.
It's. Is it Jute? Is that the way you pronounce it, Tony Jute?
Yeah, Jut.
Jut,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nixon and Kissinger, and then Lars Eric Nelson from Little Rock to Washington, D.C.,
Mm-hmm.
and Margaret Scott, Indonesia, up for grabs, and then we get to Benny Goodman and Nietzsche there at the last. But the reason I read all that is it's a lot of politics.
Well, it is a lot of politics, it's true, but it's a lot in there. I mean, it's possible that what we feature on the cover tends to be sort of more political. If you look inside, there's a Michael Wood piece on 3 novels. That's the issue? And a review of, isn't that the one with Gary? That's the one on the Jews, that's sort of political. But in general, we always tried to aim for kind of balance. We tried to have something on science or something on art. Certainly try to cover novels that we think would have some, you know, real, they're serious or they raise questions that are lasting, because I mean sometimes we don't publish a review of a novel, for example. We can be later. We try to be on time, but we can be later, and that way they have to have some reflection or ideas that will, if it's a month later than the novel has, has come out, that it still has something to say.
How do you all divide up the responsibilities here?
That's impossible. That's impossible to answer. I mean, you go to work in the morning and you just do what you do, and by the time you finish, it's 8 o'clock, and you don't really reflect back, because every day has this, has a kind of rhythm which is dictated by what comes to you and what you've commissioned, all that. But we also work very well together, I think. I mean,
You and Bob
is
Silvers.
a fantastically amazing person, and
The two of you
very
divide
brilliant.
up, Bob Silvers and you divide up the responsibilities as far as running?
yeah, I mean, it's just not organized. In fact, that's the wonderful thing about starting. If you start a magazine and it's your own, you sort of can do anything you want. There is tremendous freedom. And as you know, we sold, our publisher is also the owner now. We owned it ourselves, you see, but we have the same freedom as we did before. And, it's a very intimate, it's so small. There's just Bob and me and Ray, and we have some wonderful young people working for us.
Who's Ray?
And the editor, Ray Hederman, who is our publisher, was a very distinguished newspaper man in Mississippi, and he now, and he's been our publisher since about '85, something like that.
20 issues a year.
Is that how much we do now? We used to do 26, which was a killer. And then, one thing and another, we do sort of, they're not so much, we used to do things called double issues, which really weren't double issues quite. But they are 20, but some are, long, they are in a way double. But there's a time in the summer where, in fact, Bob and I can take off for a couple of weeks. We do sort of a very large midsummer issue, and then the issues that we're coming up with will be quite packed.
Gary Wills, Lars Eric Nelson, Tony Lewis is in here.
Yeah, that's on Lanny Guinier. Well, that's history, too.
But it's all the politics liberal. Is that fair?
I don't know whether, I mean, I don't know. We never really labeled ourselves. There's an expression that Isaiah Berlin, who is a great guru in this magazine and was very, very close friend of Bob, called liberal humanism or something like that. But I don't mean the big L word. It's just because when you say liberal, you don't, it has so many different meanings about what it is.
It's not right-wing conservative.
No, I don't think it is. On the other hand, if there was a right-wing conservative who knew a lot about something or wanted to do, and he was a wonderful writer and convincing and great, we would certainly, I mean, we're not ideological in that way. I mean, by liberal, you mean kind of free. And so I don't think we really label ourselves as anything. I mean, we're sort of both liberal but conservative in certain things, we're products of the 50s.
You grew up in Boston.
Yeah.
What kind of a life was it?
Well, I went to school. I mean, I have parents, modest means, not poor, not anything, but nothing special. And then, so I grew up it's a very New England place. And
In Boston itself or a suburb?
in the suburb, Brookline.
Brookline?
So it really, it's very, now one of the things, of course, I always feel that I've been taught so much by the New York Review, by the writers who write for us. I mean, I think a writer's, in a way, which we want it to be, is a writer's magazine, not an editor's magazine. You know, it's, and we we get the writers we admire or respect or who we feel will add something, doesn't mean they're sort of, who are either scholars who really know more in some cases than we do, you know. I mean, they're either, you know, tremendous specialists, but at the same time that they can. It's a journalistic magazine. I mean, we try to be as clear as possible, as well written as possible. We're very conscious of language. And, you know, when you know, I think when we both see grammatical error in it that's been published, we just freeze with horror. But, so we're rather meticulous about that. And and the writers we choose or we encourage to be as clear, because we're not writing for specialists. And
who are you writing for? What do you envision?
Well, in a way, basically, it's also people who care about books. And the books, in a way, it's a wonderful, as a book review, the way it started, which is allowing writers who were working for 10, 14 years on a book, and there was a kind of blackout. And so it was a way to make known these books that were of some importance and could have really died in some way. And that was, and using books as, if these books are serious, they tend to have something new to say about something that, and then you get somebody who knows something about it, who also, there's a kind of skepticism we always have by sort of large claims and so on. So we're rather, I think that's another thing, maybe in some cases too skeptical, but I mean, that's sort of the way we are.
Let me, I don't know if this will work for you, but let me ask you this. When you sit at your desk, and we're talking about excellence,
Yes.
Name a couple of writers that when you know a book is coming in that you automatically think excellence.
When you mean the authors of the books or authors of the
authors of the books. In other words, somebody says to you, Barbara, we're about to get a book from X. I mean, you've got all these books piled up in here, and you know you get 30, 40 a day. When do you personally perk up when you know there's a new writer
Well,
coming?
if I know his work, for example, I'm just reading now, and what time I can, David Remnick's book on Muhammad Ali, and I've just read about, you know, 50 pages of it, and it's extraordinary. Now, we've published David. He's now editor of The New Yorker, and we've published him for a long time when he was still at the Washington, bureau chief at the Washington Post. And I think, you know, every time he produces a book, amazingly, it seems to me an exciting event.
How about a publisher? Is there a publisher or two that always means excellence to you?
No. I think they're all very mixed. I think some do a better job than others, publish more serious things. And there are also these small publishers who are really doing very good work, and we try to keep up with that too. You know, and they're much more important now than I think they're now more, because publishing itself has got so completely complicated and overextended and overpublishing and overspending and so on. So I think the publishing scene is very different. And yet all the time we try to find the books that we really think have value in one way or another. In the first issue we have an extremely pompous editorial, which when I look at it, I sort of cringe. But it does sort of outline what we, you know, sort of what we wanted to do.
This is 63.
This is 63, and I don't know whether you remember it, but it's something about, we will only do books that, you know, raise serious questions, and if not, to expose a fraud, you know, and so on. Well, that was the spirit of of the time to be skeptical and to be and to try to find books that we think have some lasting value, raise interesting or serious questions in whatever field and
Now,
from whatever point of view.
At this stage, how big is your circulation?
It's, I think it's around, I don't have precise figures. I think it's around, say, about 130,000, something like that, which for, you know, a magazine like ours, first of all, it's not glossy, and that was the packaging that made it possible to do it then. I mean, it's on newsprint. I mean, we now have better newsprint than we used to have. And it's very simply laid out. We have a very small staff here. And so it's done, you know, it was done from the start on the cheap. One thing that we want to do is to pay writers as much as we can. That's because the first issue that we put together, they got nothing. Which I think is, yeah, they did it because of la causa, you know, so to speak. They just believed in the kind of thing we were trying to do, and they believed in the importance of books and so on. So, but then we've improved that
Do you pay it by the word or by the article?
It all, you know, it's all very various, you know. We also, sometimes if someone does, you know, just covers a subject with, you know, just you know, 6, 8 books on a certain subject and has worked for, it takes a long time to write these analytical pieces. And we take that into account. The length, of course, goes into account. All sorts of things, you know.
Oh, no.
If John D. Rockefeller, for example, wrote for us, I don't think we'd pay as much as we'd pay a young writer.
So it's need.
What comes into it, but in a minor way. I mean, but it's also mostly the work that went into it, and the because some things take longer, require much more. We also, in addition, we have sent people to various parts of the world to cover it. Again, we are sort of, you know, literary journalistic magazine. I mean,
Do you like to make
journalistic.
news? Do you like to make news? And I think you did recently.
Yes, with the Lane Scaries piece on TWA 800. That took a long time, but somebody found it. That was
Do you
good.
like that when it makes news?
Oh, sure, every magazine does, you know? But yes, we do, because we feel you know, for one thing, there's always, it's so strange because when you grew up with the magazine, at first, I was once in a hamburger shop with my son, who is then 7, and we saw, it was called Hamburger Heaven, and we saw this this guy. My son saw this guy who was actually reading the New York Review. This is during the first year. And he just couldn't believe it. He thought this was the strangest thing he'd ever seen, with somebody reading the New York Review. And he said, "Ma, there's somebody reading it." And I was just as excited as he was, you know. And now he does read it himself, I'm glad to say. He's a writer, and he does some producing in Hollywood.
What's his name?
So his name is Jacob Epstein. And he lives in Los Angeles.
The only child you have?
No, I have a daughter, Helen.
And where's she?
She is living in Prague, although she's here in New York, and she works in public health. She's a former biologist who now is working in public health.
Now, this may not work either, but I didn't tell you I was going to do this. But if somebody said, no, you'll tell me very quickly if you can do this.
Yes.
If somebody said you got to go to an island for the rest of your life, but you can have 5 books.
Oh, well, this is one of the tortures of, you know, of having so much material to go through and so on.
But in the history
what I would do,
in your life,
I'd reread Proust. I'd read Gibbon.
Rise and Fall. Rise or Fall and
Decline and
Decline and Fall. Fall and Decline.
Which I have never read.
You've never read.
I would love to reread Proust. I don't know, that's enough.
But why
I hope.
Proust? I mean, I've done interviews on
Well-
books for 10 years, and he comes up periodically.
Well,
What's the
I
reason?
think he's one of the great writers of the 20th century.
Have you spent much time with him?
I read him when I was in college, you see, and that was the great thing. And now, of course, since then, there's a wonderful new translation, which I think, in any case, it's something that stays with me, and yet I've forgotten a lot of it. And it was a tremendous experience to me when I was, 19, 20 years old. And what else I would take, I don't know. I would think there's so many volumes there that would encounter it. But I hadn't thought, because it is one of the things I really miss is being able to, I read what I can, but it's often essays of 20 pages typed. It's
Of work that's going in
of
this
work that's going
magazine.
in, or keeping up with magazines and books that you sort of, but to do for, I was talking about for great pleasure and enlightenment, I would say those two I can think of offhand. I'm sure I'll just, say, oh God, you didn't mention something, but
What did you study at Radcliffe?
I studied history and literature. And when I was there, it was, it had a fantastic history and literature department. Particularly, I did American history, and and F.O. Matheson was there, and there were some wonderful people that I could study with, and but again, coming to New York, and then particularly the New York Review has made me much more international. New England is very, in some ways, that's what they are interested in, is themselves. And so, though I've read every word of Melville, and I've read, I really, and, Anglo-American, and I really didn't very much bit French, but really feeling the kind of, tremendous interest in the rest of the world. And that's, I think, partly the writers of the New York Review, and Bob, too, who's very international. I think these are things that I owe, that...
for instance, on international, Henry Kem's book,
Yeah,
Cambodia, is in there. Now,
yeah.
why would you pick that for this?
Because, first of all, we're very interested and very concerned about Cambodia, which is one of the disaster, particularly human rights and so on. It's just terrible. And we've always, we've throughout the years have published things about Cambodia, and the book came in, and it was, clearly something that should be reviewed by somebody who knew a lot. And then there was this section in it that was so eloquent and so on. I admire him very much as a journalist anyway. And so it just happened that way, and it seemed a way to keep Cambodia. You don't know how much will this book sell. I don't know. I hope quite a bit. It's very good. And it's a way to keep it out there, Things, we haven't done anything on Monica Lewinsky, really.
On purpose?
Well, what's there to say, But in something like Cambodia, which seems to be wiped off the face of the earth, this is going on now.
Have you ever figured in all these years what Americans' taste is and why they read what they read and don't read what they read, or
Oh
don't
gosh,
read things?
I don't know. See, we have sort of, our readers, we don't know. They come up with, that's why we try to be, as broad in the sense of the subjects that we cover. And, when we put together an issue, we try to, have a balance of things. Actually, I think this cover is quite political, but some aren't, we try to have a kind of mixture of things. You can't expect, these pieces can be demanding, though I think they're all fascinating and readable, but you can't there's no time in the world for someone who's working on his own stuff to read everything in the New York Review. We have to, and we do, and want to, over and over again. But you can't. So there are things that if people are not interested in science, you know, then they don't. You know, but there's always something it's sort of, in the sense that the magazine is journalism, it's sort of news, you know. I mean, we like to have something rather than going over the tired old thing.
When you're on a regular biweekly schedule, which
We
is
are
most
now.
of the year, what's the deadline and what day does it come out under those circumstances?
Oh, I see. Well, we're bi-weekly. I mean, every other week, if that's the same thing, bi-weekly. And we sort of say, this is theoretically, because it doesn't quite work this way. You know, we finish an issue, say, on the Thursday, everything has gone to press. So we have what we call Press Week, which really starts on Monday afternoon. We lay it all out. Meanwhile, we're doing other things, but that's when it happens. It then goes to the printer Thursday afternoon or evening, and we get copies in the office on the Saturday. Then we rev up again right there for the next issue. It's kind of relentless. We have a sort of nonstop in the fall, and of course, it's now perfect timing, our 35th anniversary, believe it or not, and we're having a sort of special issue, which we hope will have goodies for everyone.
Have you, over these 35 years, literally offered a platform to people who've gone on to become very well known? I mean, have they started here?
We have. Oh, you mean started writing
Starting writing
articles?
for you and then became more and more well known, and now we know who they are.
Oh, well, I mentioned David Remnick. I mean, he's been writing since he was 19, I think. Wonderful. But we did publish his articles, which he wrote when he was working at the Washington Post in Russia, and we started, and we began publishing him, and now he's I mean, it's not because of us, but he's somebody that we did publish, and I hope still will. I think, you know, we will. And although he's got a lot of other things to do, plus his own loyalty to his own magazine, I mean, which will be wonderful. But that's one example. I don't know, we also started with sort of, that was the luck of it, and actually I think it gave us a bit of credibility too, because was in our first issue we had Auden Wilson. We published Nabokov. We Vladimir Nabokov, and you know, so there was a mixture, and then people who were unknown. But I think a lot of them have gone on, including also people who worked here, who have done, you know, very well and have, you know, written important books and so on.
Well, are you surprised at all that it lasted 35 years?
Yes,
I mean, did you think in the beginning it would last?
Well, you know, T.S. Eliot said about the Criterion, he said, a magazine can only last 10 years. So after the first 10 years, it was, well, but it did. Also, it's never, it has to be doing something right, because, I mean, and after the second year, it really didn't lose money. We raised a very small amount of money when we decided to go on with it. And you know, it just, because we do, it's very simple, simply presented, I mean, to be clear, and not expensively produced or anything. And it's also a service, too, in the sense that, I mean, the formula of being a book review is a service, say, for people who want to know what books are coming out and which ones they should be interested in, or even what they don't have to read, having read the review. That can happen, I'm afraid.
Do you have a bestseller list?
No.
Did you ever think about doing that?
No, it doesn't really reflect very much, except that a lot of people have bought them, or at least some bookstores think they did, you know? So, no, we never thought of that. I love lists, you know, anyway, in general, and people do like them. But that isn't a list. We once did a wonderful piece by Gore Vidal, and it was about, he reviewed all the 20 bestsellers on the Times list. And that was a period, that was way back in the, I think, early 70s or something. And there were all sorts of, you know, sort of a lot of, you know, sort of romances and all sorts of things. I must say it was absolutely wonderful piece, but that's the only time we've gotten near the bestseller list, unless something like Cold Mountain, which has been a fantastic bestseller, and we had a wonderful review of it by Alfred Kazin, who just died some months ago, and was a great, you know, great contributor to us. And so sometimes we hit them because these books have some meaning. But the only time as bestsellers, as a clue to taste or something, was when Gore Vidal did it, and it was quite wonderful.
Do you write at all?
No, I did, but I don't.
Have you ever written a book?
Never, no.
Have you ever had any interest in it?
Oh, I don't think I really know a little about a lot of things, but I don't know a lot about, I don't think, you know, I couldn't. I'm not a writer. I think, you know, probably, you know, I suppose, you know, that would be great, but I'm not.
What's a day like for you? And how many days a week do you work?
Well, actually, I've got some sort of routine. I'm here many weekends. I do now have a house in the country, and I take work up there and read. I mean, that's not all I do. I really do take walks and do. I mean, I don't want to be kind of goody two-shoes or something, but I do work all the time. So.
And when is it, I mean, what's it like when you're working? What are you doing?
Well, reading manuscripts, editing, or sort of making suggestions on them, sending books out, you know. What else?
I mean, do you have
on the phone,
you have to find the reviewer.
Yeah, you have to think, and it's, you know, you have to look at the book, too, just to have some, some idea of who might be you can't tell by, you know, just by looking at the flap copy or something.
And how many books do you think the New York Review of Books touches a year? Writes about, mentions,
Gosh.
Reviews?
We do count them at the end of, you know, when we put together an issue, how many books that we were actually reviewing. And of course, we do general articles, too. We try to do as much as possible. We don't, again, we have in each issue, it's, I would think we'd have 12 or 13 pieces of varying lengths.
So you touch about 250 books a year or something like that?
Oh, I think more than that. I think more than that. Because, you see, we do these jumbo wrap-up, we wrap up a lot of books in one. It's much more than that, because some review will be 5, 6 books. Sometimes novel reviews, we do 2 or 3 at a time. And it's not always true, but then, but it's many more books than that.
You know, I want to ask you, and this has nothing to do with writing, but it's throughout the review of books, and I didn't count them up, but the David Levine caricatures. I mean, here's one of Peter Gibney.
Right, yeah.
Who is David Levine, and why do you have him all throughout your publication?
Well, he's our staff artist. And of course, beginning when we started, the whole question was, you couldn't just have gray type. I don't mean this as that it was sort of like an afterthought, but we had to have pictures just for this newsprint, black type, no color, little. So the thing is, what? And we use a lot of old 19th century art, too. One thing is, with paper like this, we now do photographs, which are quite, to illustrate pieces, but it's the line drawings, you see, that he does that actually very, very clean on the page, you see. And that's the Nietzsche one, which we've used a couple of times. He did it, I think, a few years ago. But one, they're very, very, I mean, he's a wonderful draftsman. And two, he's very witty. And there's always a little bit of an edge. I mean, we can't be, we're not solemn. That, yes, exactly.
Who is this?
I have to have nearsighted. Oh, that's Wally Shawn. Yes.
The actor.
Yes.
And who is David Levine?
And David Levine is a serious artist. He does oils, he does watercolors as well, which I have seen, and they're beautiful, kind of like Sargent. You know, they're beautiful watercolors, except you get close, he's very, yes, it's Lenny Guinier, it's very good too, isn't it? You know, he is a wonderful caricaturist, and some people are just horrified what he does to them. But he's just has that edge, you know, that humor, wit, really, that sort of suits us. I think he's really a wonderful artist, and so this has been a blessing.
Now, of the 130,000 in circulation, how much of that is in the New York City area?
Oh, I think we really are. You know, I wish I had figures, which I should have looked up, but we're cities. I mean, we have a lot in California. We're really national, really. When we first started the paper, that was part of our audience, was, you know, academic audience. That is people who are really interested in books. And among them are academics as well as, but it's throughout the country. I mean, we have a lot in Chicago. I don't have a breakdown at all, but it's New York City a lot, sure. And, but it's throughout the country.
And when you sit at your desk and take calls and emails and all that stuff, when do you know, when's the first indication you have that one of your issues has struck? I mean, that there's something that's moving people. How do you find out? Do they get mad at you?
We get a lot of letters, but they're usually complaints. So it's very hard to tell because people don't write and say. They say, people that you know, if they think it's something's very good, they mention a particular piece they liked a lot, or several, you know. I don't know. I think that but just by its keeping going, we feel that people do like it, which
what
is
do people
very
complain
gratifying.
about? I mean, I can tell you what they complain about with us. I mean, you can almost predict what they get mad about, which is all right. But I mean, what do you find that people, based on your tradition and that what people expect, when do they get mad and what do they get mad about?
Well, sometimes authors of books review get sort of sore and feel, which also we take very seriously if they feel that they, you know, that they've been unappreciated or misrepresented in one or two particular ways. I mean, if they feel they've been misquoted, we're very careful about checking. And we try, I mean, fairness is one of our, you know, we just really try to be and not judgmental without making a convincing argument, and with really, you know, has to be concrete, to really quotes to explain what this guy is trying to do. But then he feels, and you know, if I were a writer, I would feel the same way, but no, you don't get it, you know, which writers quite rightly feel.
Do you decide when you are going to have a reviewer for a book which way you want the review to come out with before you select who you're going to review it?
You have to repeat that, I'm sorry.
You got a book on your desk and you say, this is a piece of junk, but it's an important book, and you say, let's find Joe Smith who's going to do a hatchet job on this.
Oh, I don't think we think that way. We really don't. I mean, at least I like to think we don't, but I don't think we do. As let's get him, you know, is...
or this is, I mean, you and Bob...
It's sort of like, let's get it. We don't do that, because we're not Polemical magazine, really. You know, and we don't have, again, as I say, we don't really have a line. And so we don't, I don't think we think, I mean, you know, Hitler, Stalin, and so on, you know, and so on. But, I mean, in that, we don't have enemies. I don't think, I mean, they may hate us or what, but we're not aware of this. We absolutely try not to have any kind of, you know, animosity or any kind of, we try to be unemotional about books and try to give it the fairest shot, which is somebody who might, who knows about, you know, or who is very responsible and fair-minded. It's fairness.
Now,
You know?
where do you go outside of the New York Review of Books to find, you know, reading other reviews? Where do you find other reviews that are worth reading from your personal standpoint?
Well, I sort of, you know, we try to keep up with the magazines because we want to know about writers. It's a way of finding out about writers. Newspapers to a fault.
How's the New York Times do?
Oh, you see, that's a great service because they tell you everything that's coming out and you may have missed something. And they are more, you know, they're very timely, and so if it's a way of checking. There are also a couple of services, you know, like the Kirkus service, and which is very good and very, you know, tough, and Publishers Weekly, the announcements of books, and then there are books we just know about from other ways. I read the, you know, London Review and TLS, which also books coming out in England or books we may have missed here.
Times Literary Supplement?
Yeah.
What about Wall Street Journal editorial?
I read those, yeah.
Book,
Yeah.
do they tend to be
That's
ideological?
a very good book page, and I love also, I love the front page too. You know, I think they're wonderful
But is the Wall Street Journal
reporters.
ideological in their book reviews?
I don't think so particularly. I mean, not really. Sometimes I would think, well, I wouldn't have asked that person because that person isn't fair. But I think on the whole they try to be quite fair.
What about the New York Times?
Oh, I think they're quite fair. I mean, we all make mistakes and things. You know, I'm not saying we don't either, but
Well, what about the business? I mean, what about things like, and you see articles from time to time about when a newspaper reporter writing a book for the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal ends up being reviewed in that paper favorably.
I think they try. Yeah. Oh well.
I mean, is there?
I think they try to be fair, and usually what they do is not have. So I noticed that the Times and the Daily, if it's a Times reporter, for example, who does a book, they usually try to get somebody from outside the paper. And, you know, so I think there's an effort to be, you know, not to be, you know, too cozy. And we try that too.
Do you have a competitor?
I think we're very, you know, for one thing, 130,000, you know, and we also have European and Asian circulation, which I really don't know what that is. But I think we're very, we're not like the New Yorker, although, I mean, I do think the New Yorker is also serious journalism, basically, including, you know, the literary material and everything. I don't think we do, because it's very different. We're a mixture of reviews and articles. But we're not like the academic journals. We're not. So I don't think so. We're small, and we're going to probably. I mean, I don't see a big glossy thing coming out of this. We've always just been rather around 120, 130. I think that's the people who then, of course, give them, you know, around there's newsstand stuff, but newsstand sales and some bookstores too. But I don't see us as a, you know, as a mass market publication.
How long have you been here on Broadway?
Oh, well, we moved from extremely squalid offices about a little over a year ago. And,
was it more fun when it was more squalid?
No, it was terrible. Everybody thought it was so quaint that we were, you know, that we were in this filthy, messy, I mean, this is sort of messy, but dirty office with a mouse. But in fact, it's so much nicer to be here. So we've been here for about a year and a half, and it's divine.
Now, if you put
views, everything.
All of your staffers in a room, how many do you have there? People that are full-time with the New York Review of Books.
I'm just trying to think. Editorial side is very I'm just trying to think, there's 4.5 assistants, editorial assistants, or so, or more or less. And then we have 3 researchers, assistant editors who do, make up and, read proof and give, and they're all smart and they give great suggestions. And Bob and me.
15.
That's it. Well, that's just the editorial side. The rest of it is, people, we have in-house typesetting and so on. We're very computerized except for Bob and me, who are still using pencils. And the rest of them, they're advertising people, publicity people. We have a researcher here who goes to the libraries and, does a lot of checking. It's small. It's maybe 30, a little over 30 maybe, early 30s.
And you refer to Bob and me. Who is Bob for those who don't follow the...
Oh, it's Bob Silvers, whom I've been working with great admiration, let me say, since 1962 and a half. So
And
it's
you've both
been
been
a long
here
time.
all this time.
Yes, nonstop, I must say.
I want to ask you about writing. Is there any way for you to define what good writing is, what you think is good writing, and when you see it? You mentioned David Remnick, but
it's just such an instinctive thing, in a way. But my first job was at Doubleday reading the slush pile. So one way of learning is what's terrible. You sort of know, you sort of ask yourself why it's so terrible. But I think clarity, particularly for a journalistic magazine, which this is really.
fancy language or not fancy language?
Well, it depends on the writer. I mean, some people will be like, just ornate for no purpose and just simply unclear, and fuzziness is the worst.
Long
that you
sentence.
sometimes get.
Long sentences, short sentence.
I don't mind. Gibbon was a great long sentencer, and you could follow every word. It's great clarity. But it's a sort of instinct. There are things you don't like, and then you think about it again, and you think, aha, I know why a good writer, has used that, and then you let it go. But it's ear, eye, nose and throat.
Women writers versus men writers. Is there a difference? Can you tell when you're reading someone if they're a man or a woman?
That's a really tough question to get into. You can't, and it's just a nest of questions. And, we publish a great many women writers, she said defensively, but no, I don't think so. I mean, I think it's just what it is. It's very hard to define. It's just what it is on the page. We try to, publish as many really what we consider good writers as much as possible, and that is not using jargon. My daughter mentioned something that she'd read, which was something called metropolitanizing, and I thought, I don't know what that means. Neither did she. It isn't in the dictionary, which, Milton made up words too, but I don't know what it means. Making more urban, or it wasn't in the context, it had no meaning. That sort of thing, which is making up meaningless words just to fudge your thought, which is usually the reason for, lack of clarity.
Do you keep a dictionary near you?
Yes, I do, Webster. I do.
And do you feel good about looking at it, or does it bug you when you look at a word and don't know what it means?
Oh, no, I'm sort of ashamed of myself, but sometimes people can get very technical, and you feel that this should be defined. You have to judge by yourself. You think, if I don't know it, many readers will not either. I mean, it's just an instinct yourself. And, of course, I think it's great if everybody looks at the dictionary. I love dictionaries, so, but...
Do you read up, or do you like to read up or read down? What I mean by that, Mortimer Adler said in his book, the book he read, How to Read a Book, he advised everybody to read up, make it harder than than,
Oh.
so that you're always
Oh.
fighting to learn
Struggling.
more? I mean, where are you?
No, I don't agree with that. There's such great writers who are so simple, you know? And they're absolutely great. If you look at a story by Borges, there's a wonderful new collection of all of Borges' short stories are translated in one volume, and it's fabulous. And the translation seemed very, very good. And you look at one page, the simplicity of it, and then, it hits you that it's really not so simple at all, you know. So there's this sort of like, it's a double take or something, you know, you have this.
Over the 35 years, what has changed? Not here, but
The world.
What has changed in the book world? I mean,
Oh, well, I think it's sort of a bit out of hand, and I think it's sort of correcting itself a little bit. But I think there's sort of, I think it's very hard for a serious book that's not immediately, I'm not talking Cold Mountain, that was a kind of fluke, but I think it's very hard for serious books to get the readers they deserve, because they're just buried under the publicity for, you know, best-selling writers. And I think they tend to get very neglected. This is one service I hope we, you know, we try to be very much aware of and try to perform. And there's...
what about quality of the book itself, physically?
Well, there's still, the quality of the book.
Yeah.
Well, they were always sort of, you know, when you look back at old editions of things, they're not so great either. I don't think the quality, although in some, I'm not, you know, you look at it, Knopf has always been very careful about the paper and the typeface and so on, and they're very, still that way. I think, you know, it's very hit or miss, you know.
Quality of the writing.
Quality of the writing is more so. I don't think that editors were, it was a kind of, at one time, a gentleman's profession. That is, it paid no money. And people would come in out of a kind of dedication to the word, you know, so to speak, and dedication to that. And I don't think, I think now that's changed a lot. Of course, there are always a great many exceptions to this, and there are really very serious people. But in general, first of all, it's a much more commercial business than when I, you know, in the early 50s, when I started. And so that's changed. I think there is a, you know, there's this terrific bottom line emphasis, as we all know, but I think much, much greater, that if, you know, that a lot of writers, I think, probably have terrible trouble publishing their books because they're not on their face commercial. I think books tend to finally get published, but I think there's much greater emphasis on very sure commercial properties, which of course lose money just as much, you know. This.
We're running out of time. I want to ask you, how long are you going to do this?
Till I drop.
I mean, mentally, you want to stay with it forever.
Oh yeah, as long as I can.
And I got
They'll have to carry us out, as somebody said.
I got a last big question for you. My little sheet of paper that said, you know, a little background on you, said in parentheses that the the last part of your name is pronounced Steen, and I hear you saying Stein, so I assume
no,
I
it
got
is
that.
Jason Epstein. Yes, that's.
And it's Barbara Epstein.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's not Steen like my. So I want to make sure that that's
There's
clear.
always a debate. Leonard Bernstein, Jason Epstein.
What determines whether it's Stein?
I have no idea. I think the Ein is more Germanic, I think. EI is always in German I, and IE is E. But this is EI, and so I don't know. You know, it's sort of.
What was your maiden name?
Zimmerman.
And where did your family come from
They
originally?
came from my mother. My mother's family was from Russia. She's part Russian, And my father's was from Lithuania, Germany, that sort of thing.
And
So,
and you grew up in Boston, went to Radcliffe, and came to New York what year?
1950. So,
Been here ever since.
well, it's
And
been
we'll-
all right.
and we'll
I
find
can't
you
imagine
right here.
it anywhere.
Barbara Epstein, thank you very much for taking the
Well,
time
thank
and
you
joining
very
us.
much,
Appreciate
too.
it.
You can contact the New York Review of Books by writing the publication at 1755 Broadway, 5th floor, New York, New York, 10019. Their web address is www.nybooks.com. And to learn more about Ms. Epstein, go to our Book TV website, www.booktv.org.